I think we can get started.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, it looks like we got over 100 some people in this, which is great. So, hi everybody. Here comes the professional part of the meeting and conversation. If you joined us early, you already have seen that this group has no shortage of being able to chat and obviously tell stories of the industry, which we hope to give you a very spirited conversation today on ticketing. More so featured on the pro sports arenas and stadiums that are around the area, around the country right now, and how the stoppage in entertainment sports has really affected them. We'll introduce our panel in just a minute. First, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jason Varnish. I'm an adjunct professor at Point Park University, and I teach the ticketing course. Big stretch from working 17 years with ticketing and in the box office. I started in 2003 at Mellon Arena, thanks to Ryan Mance, who I see his face is on here as well, who hired me as his assistant. In 2005, I became the box office manager. Throughout those years, I helped open up Console R&D Center in 2010. I believe it was 2011 or 12 where I had the luck to be able to invited to Point Park University to teach a elective course on box office management, is what it was called at first. 8 years later, it's morphed into ticketing and has become a part of the curriculum, which I'm very proud of and thankful to everybody on this call. As of right now, thanks to Bob Dura, who's helping to moderate this event from Point Park staff, Paige Beal and Ed Traversary that I see on here, and I believe I saw Kendra Ross on one of the other pages as well too. So thank you to all the Point Park staff for allowing us to put this together. That's basically just a little brief history of me, because if any of you guys that have had my class know, for 3 hours, it doesn't take me too long to start talking and not stop talking. But you all hear me enough, so you're not here to listen to me as much today, but we're here to kind of invite conversation from the 4 panelists that we have. Before I invite you to introduce us, to be introduced to them, let me first introduce you to Jocelyn Bankson, current student at Point Park University. Jocelyn is going to help kind of read down through some of the rules and etiquette of the program, about muting and unmuting, different aspects of it, and a little brief history of Jocelyn. Jocelyn was in my classes last semester when we had the difficult chance of having to take it to an online learning during the middle of all of this. So she's experienced the changes that we've had to go through in place, you know, with education, with events and everything. Jocelyn started off her freshman career by shadowing with BOM Advisors, she chose. And we did not scare her away, even though the first time she met with us, we put a ticket scanner in her hand and told her, go there, scan some tickets, and this is the event industry. And she has stayed with us since then, has since worked with us at BOM Advisors over at Heinz Field with the Steelers as part of our gate resolution team that goes right out there in the front lines and helps people with their mobile tickets, no matter what the weather is, no matter what the rush is 15 minutes before kickoff, she is right there in the middle of it. So without further ado, let me introduce Jocelyn to give you some of the details of the session.
Thank you, Jason. So welcome everyone. I'm just gonna go over some housekeeping notes. So if you see the chat option, it's in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Feel free to say hi and where you're from. I know some people have already done that. And ask any questions that you have there, and we'll kind of get through them throughout the panel. Also, if you emailed any questions beforehand, make sure that you ask them again in the chat so we can get to them. Also, to point out, this meeting is recorded. It will be on the SAEM Next page at pointpark.edu/SAEM Next, and you can also find it on the YouTube page, the SAEM YouTube page. Also, everyone should be muted in the interest of making sure that the audio quality is good for everyone. Again, Bob Durda, he has to kind of mute and unmute everybody, so hopefully that goes smoothly. Again, please use the chat for any questions. We'll address as many as we can get to. And lastly, you can join us again next Wednesday for another upcoming session of SAEM Next.
Great, thanks, Jocelyn. Let's get started with the conversation. My first participant needs no introduction. He's the 2019 NBA MVP. He's a 4-time NBA All-Star, and in circles is known as the Greek. I'm sorry, I Googled the wrong thing. That's for Giannis Antetokounmpo that plays for the Milwaukee Bucks. This is Jonathan Lack. It says he sells tickets at the building the Milwaukee Bucks play in. So sorry, I messed that up already. So just making it a little lighthearted for everybody. But Jonathan, by no means, is not Giannis Antetokounmpo, but he works in the same building that the Milwaukee Bucks play in. Jonathan is the Senior Director of Ticketing at Fiserv Forum in Milwaukee. He's born and raised in England. He completed a degree in music, University at Southampton, before moving, before I skip through some of that, he spent 5 years at Ticketmaster UK as a client account manager, where then he went into work as the event ticketing manager at the O2 Arena, which I'm sure everybody in this building has heard of, in this venue has heard about. In 2014, in his words, in a very English way, John and his wife made the trip across the pond to make a go of life in America, where he started working at the Schottenstein in Columbus, Ohio. So pay attention. You'll see a lot of the connections between our panel here as we continue on. So when the opportunity arose, Jonathan, 2 years ago, had the opportunity of opening a building in Milwaukee, and it's now in its second year at the Fiserv Forum, home of the Milwaukee Bucks. In his spare time, Jonathan is a father of 2 young children, enjoys playing the sax, collecting vinyl, and trying to make heads or tails of American sport. Let me get through our panel real quick fast. Secondly, is Cait Schumann. She's the Associate General Manager of Ticketing Administration for Nationwide Arena. Cait's worked at Nationwide Arena for close to 20 years. She has my 17 in the ticketing industry beat with that. Starting as a part-time ticket seller. And one thing why I mention all this is you'll notice that a lot of the panelists on here started off in some part-time positions. A lot of things that the students on here have the opportunity to do and see exactly where they can get to by starting in, the entry-level positions. So she also started by working at the local Ticketmaster Charge by Phone Center, which by no means is an envious position for any of us who have ever tried to reach and call Ticketmaster. We know what she's probably been put through there. The company that she worked for ended up taking over the Schottenstein Center as well and working with the Ohio State University. Notice how I said the Ohio State University for you on there. Her duties expanded to oversee special events at Ohio Stadium, Mershon Auditorium, including as well Nationwide Arena and the Schottenstein Center. So she's juggled and managed multiple events. She's a native of Columbus, so she's happy that she's been able to work for as long as she has in her dream job in her hometown. Third on our panel, coming from out west, but originating out here and having ties to the Pittsburgh area, is Andrew Bragman. He's the Vice President of Ticket Operations at Sofi Stadium and Hollywood Park in Los Angeles, California. Andrew joined SoFi Stadium in 2019. He oversees all ticketing for the 71,240 seat stadium, the 6,000 seat performance venue, and all ticket events through the 298-acre Hollywood Park district. So if you ever thought you don't have enough work, look at Andrew's titles and see all the things that he's decided to take on. This will be the home of the Los Angeles Chargers and the Los Angeles Rams. And to not put any more weight on his shoulders, this brand new venue, if you've been paying attention being built, it's going to be home to the 2022 Super Bowl, 2023 College Football Playoff Championship, the opening closing ceremonies of the 2028 Summer Olympics. Along the way, Andrew did ticket operations for the Washington Nationals. He made the great decision of leaving there right before they won the World Series. So we can bring that up to him later. Sorry. But along that journey, if you were on here earlier, we like to talk about what's called a ticketing family tree, and those are the people in your box offices and the people along the way and that you pass. Sorry, Steve Rubin, I didn't know if WrestleMania was public yet, but yes, that will be home to WrestleMania next year as well, too. So thank you, Steve. But Andrew started off out with the Fresno Grizzlies, but also made his way through Oracle Arena, where my first ever assistant, Chris Convery, was box office manager and hired Andrew as his assistant. So Andrew then moved up the ranks and came back here to Pittsburgh to work with the Pittsburgh Pirates in their box office as well. So he has some hometown ties to the region as well. And speaking of hometown ties, let me introduce Carrie Cammack, who, while being from out traveling through Florida, Atlanta, and now ending up in Los Angeles, is a diehard Steelers fan. And one of the first things as ticketing friends we bonded over and still tried. Kathy Lebo, none of that, please. No Ravens fans were included on this. We're still trying to make it to a game together finally. But Carrie Cammack comes from also one of the most busiest venues in all of the world, and is the VP of Box Operations at Staples Center in the Microsoft Theater in downtown Los Angeles, California. If you ever look at the schedule and see the types of things that go through there, you know how busy her workload is. Not only hosting as many concerts, Grammy Awards, X Games and whatnot, but also home to Los Angeles Kings, Los Angeles Clippers, Lakers, and the Sparks, I believe, correct? And several other professional teams that have come and gone. Carrie attended University of Florida, where she got her degree in marketing and her master's in sport management. She started off the job as a part-time job on the campus working for the student ticket office. She made her way through getting a paid internship in ticket sales for the Atlanta Falcons and moved to Atlanta for 3 months. Upon graduation, she became group sales manager for Maloof Sports and Entertainment, home of the Sacramento Kings when they used to play at Arco Arena, now moved into Golden One Center in Sacramento. In 2005, she became ticket operations assistant at the Arco Arena. In 2010, she accepted the position of box office operations manager at Staples Center, thanks to Diana, who's also on here as well, talking about ticketing family trees. And I see Jonathan Sandoval smiling as well. But she's since moved up to and become VP of Box Operations on many other different job titles and stuff. So thank you, all four of you, ticketing friends of mine, but also your resumes speak for yourself of the type of experience you have. So like I said, everyone hears me talk enough that goes to this university. So let's put it in your hands. And we're going to start with John. John, thanks for joining and allowing me to have a little bit of ribbing on your behalf, as is customary with us. But
yeah, if you call it that, it's fine.
Coming from a brand new building, you're in your second year right now, and you're out. The tenant of your building is by far the best team in the NBA. Going into last season, at this point of this season, what's been the impact of having this stoppage affect you in the community, as well as the type of rush you guys were going to have into the push into the playoffs coming up?
Well, I mean, like, from looking back at the history of our building opening September 2018, everything that we've kind of gone through, the first season where we had the best record in the NBA, and Milwaukee been waiting a really long time to get us, to get to a championship and win the championship. Had an amazing first year. And we had a great new building, state-of-the-art arena that the city could be really proud of. Had phenomenal ticket sales. On the concert side, we booked in more shows than we were expecting. Really, really great first year. Second year was looking to eclipse that, if I'm quite honest with you. We had the DNC coming up this summer. We had a team that was on course to have an even better record than the year before. We were looking for another really good shot at the championship. So we were racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour towards, playoffs again and getting ready for that. So, this whole coronavirus thing kind of put the brakes on really hard for this whole industry, because we're racing forwards. We're always looking at how we can do and, we can pull off operationally as a building, how we can pull it off better than we have before. So we're already thinking way ahead, and that was what we're thinking about. So everything had to change from what we were thinking about. And from a community point of view, the Bucks is a massive leader in the community in Milwaukee. We provided this incredible arena that people can be a part of. Everybody remembers the playoffs in the city last year. We had thousands of people outside the building. It really brought the community together in a new way. So it's disappointing, there's going to be some playoffs happening in a different way this year now, and with reduced teams in Florida, so we've got that to look forward to. And we obviously can't have those games in our building, but we can definitely innovate and look to how we can engage with our fans in a different way. It's a very virtual world now. We can obviously do that, but there's going to be ways that we can we can work with our fans to make them feel like they're included in part of the community. And it's, we've got another great shot. Carrie will disagree, but she's got two of the best teams in the West in her building. But we'll be there, and it's going to be quite incredible when it happens. And also, the Black Lives Matter that's going on right now. The Bucks is a leader in the community in that respect too. We had on Sunday just gone, we arranged, the Bucks they led a march through Milwaukee with the players. So we're actively involved in our community and in the city, and it's kind of a big focus for us right now is how we can put our fans first, and then look to the future and how we can safely welcome them back when the next season returns, and when we can have concerts, because being in a community and having people in your building and attending events is the reason why we do what we do in ticketing. And I'm sure that all the panelists here we're all really excited to eventually get back to that sometime.
That brings up a great point that I forgot to mention to kind of lead us into it. But for those of you that were on Ed's panel last week, Stuart Ross from Red Light Management had a great kind of almost lead into what we were talking about here today, in that he mentioned that concerts are kind of at the mercy of the pro tenants in a way. Those buildings are built with the pro teams and pro sports in mind to fill the majority of the days, and concerts kind of fill in around them. And it's really the kind of sense of security of these pro teams, like you mentioned, Jonathan, and the Bucks leading the way of helping the community feel safe being all around each other once again, and everything too, really before kind of concerts do happen. They're going to happen maybe in smaller capacities, maybe not in arenas and stadiums off to begin with. But that's an important thing to know, that the teams and the tenants are the main shareholders in those venues. And another thing to point out with the panel that's on right now, the panel doesn't necessarily, none of the ones on here work directly for the teams. They work for the venue management companies. So they themselves are not necessarily at the mercy of the teams, but have to follow, work alongside and follow their lead on a lot of things. So Jonathan, I know one thing you were talking about yesterday was kind of how your duties change a little bit for Bucks games. How does that change from a concert to a working a Bucks game?
Sure. I mean, for concerts, I'll be, we have a team of three of us that will handle our special events, and we have a team of about 8 roughly that will be full-time staff on the Bucks side of things. So we're involved in helping out. We help each other out an awful lot, but things that come under my what I do in a Bucks game is like access control. I'll be point person on that, or our team will be, along with, we do a lot of loyalty and things in the building with loaded value. So we kind of run point, make sure that's all running smoothly. Just it's different hats to wear, but we have to kind of wear different hats in this role from time to time.
Sure. And I think for all of you that are on here as well too, if you've been following the track of pro sports right now, the NBA just recently announced what they plan to do by possibly starting on July 31st as the tentative date, with the tournament in Orlando. So with that already, that's mentioned that, Jonathan doesn't have a playoff rush to prepare for. And he did mention some of the things that they'll do to adapt, to engage the fans and everything. But thank you, Jonathan. Moving on along to the same sense is the NHL, who was also one of the first ones to announce a playoff structure that they would be doing, although no dates have been set yet, but a 24-team structure, which somehow will allow the Columbus Blue Jackets to make it into the playoffs. Isn't that right, Cait? So,
yeah, thanks.
We go to Cait from the Nationwide Arena and the Columbus Blue Jackets. Keep in mind, she is also a Columbus Crew fan who is affiliate of the Pittsburgh Riverhounds here in Pittsburgh, and their colors are black and yellow, so let's not hold too much against Cait in that. But Cait, obviously, same thing with you having a pro tenant and also having to do with the university there, and a heavy schedule of pro sports, between football, basketball, volleyball that played at the Shot. How is it you're seeing this now with having to juggle so many multiple venues, and how are you doing with the rescheduling, postponement, and filling in of those dates?
Well, we're actually lucky that we do have 2 venues. Because if we don't have the date at one venue, we can push them to the other venue. which during some of the reschedules, that has popped up where shows already been on sale at one building and the possibility of moving to the other building. So that is, we're lucky on that in that respect. We don't have too much of an issue booking around the tenants that we have, because we do have the ability to move to the other building. So from January to March at the Schottenstein Center, they're pretty packed with the men's and women's basketball and men's hockey that play there. So we tend to be heavier at Nationwide Arena during that time. But then during April and June, we have the NHL playoffs to contend with at Nationwide Arena. So we're pretty heavy at the Schottenstein Center during that time. We try to make sure that we have the same amount of shows at each venue, so that the workload is the same. And then we do have some promoters come in and think that playing at the Schottenstein Center on the Ohio State campus is beneficial for students, but the buildings are only 2 miles apart, so we've seen no issue with having college based shows at Nationwide Arena. We still get the students down at Nationwide Arena as we do up at the Schottenstein Center. So.
And the impact of what you guys book and everything that happens, I mean, for those of you that have been to Columbus before, Nationwide Arena is built around a great area called the Arena District. Obviously, it's, you know, how have you seen or heard anything of how the impact economically is kind of impacting the region around there, restaurants, you know, and whatnot?
Well, we kind of had the same during the NHL lockouts that we've had. When we don't have a lot of traffic in the district, it does slow down. But when we do have, like when we get the playoffs in, which we've had the last couple of years, there's been a huge uptick, and everybody thrives at that point. We are close enough to downtown. We're right next to downtown, considered part of downtown. So we do get the restaurants and bars around do get some carryover from downtown, but this time, since we haven't had an event since March 12th when the NHL stopped, and then everything else after that stopped, it's been tough around here. The restaurants just opened within the last 3 weeks for outside patio dining, and then just within the last 2 weeks have they opened up for inside, obviously with restrictions. Everybody has to be 6 feet apart and that. So it's been tough around here, but it's looking up. Yeah.
And for those of you maybe not in the industry, you know, and from Point Park here, that don't really realize what we've all been doing kind of in the last 3 months. Cait mentioned it, you know, there's really kind of 3 things that we've done to our shows. We've either canceled them outright, we've either postponed them with a regular date to be determined later, kind of them waiting to see when this works its way through, or we've rescheduled it with a new date. And a lot of them in the arenas, I think, Cait, you've seen, we're seeing them being pushed to 2021 probably right now.
Yes, pretty much everything's being pushed to 2021. What we have noticed is they're trying to go for around the same date that they had in 2020, and now it's going into 2021.
So obviously, affecting what you mentioned earlier, budgets of those places around you within the arena just are having to adjust and everything, as well as internal budgets for a lot of these venues too. So yep, that's great. Thank you for all that, and that hopefully leads us right into talking to Andrew right now, who is opening one of the largest football stadiums in the country right now. And when you open a building, you want to do it with a bang, and you want to do it with something. Remember, here in Pittsburgh, we opened Consol Energy Center with 2 Paul McCartney shows. Jonathan, you had the Killers, right? I think. Yep. Right. Andrew, talk to us a little bit about the challenges of opening a building and the scheduling and rescheduling of some of the biggest concerts the area was going to see, probably, and leading into the football season.
Yeah, I was thinking this morning, because I started there July 1st of last year, which was a year to the day from when we were supposed to get the keys to the building. And we have countdown clocks in there that started at 365 days the day I walked in. And I'm going to walk in today when I go over there, and it's going to say 20 days, which is crazy to think about. We're supposed to open originally July 1st get the keys, and I see my friends from the senior group on here. We were supposed to have 2 nights of Taylor Swift to open up the stadium, which would have been, a once in a lifetime experience for us. Unfortunately, that has shifted now, and all of our concerts that we had scheduled in 2020 have been postponed into 2021 at this point for us. Interesting situation for us with having 2 football teams if the NFL goes off. We're basically busy every weekend from the middle of August through the football season. So, from my standpoint, it's been a huge adjustment. I said I started July 1st, and it was daunting to say coming in 1 year to the day just to get the building functional, operational. How are we going to make things work? And then you have something come up with what we're dealing with the virus situation. So not only figuring out the stuff we were going to have to do anyways, but layering on top of all the different contingency plans we're working through on how the building's going to have to operate without really knowing how it operates to start off with from a baseline standpoint. So really, working through all those options, what that's going to look like, working hand in hand with our 2 tenant teams. You mentioned in the introduction, we have another venue that's supposed to open in March or April of next year, about a 6,000 person theater. That's still on schedule. So we're planning ahead with that and getting ready for events to start going on sale over there. So really going through the process of looking at, the baseline, what do we have to do to operate? And we were joking, you and I, about counting seats. We still have to count our seats and make sure that everything is installed properly. We don't have technology in the building yet. The wiring's there, but we haven't plugged in a computer. So part of it still is just the baseline of making sure this stadium can operate when we have that first event, which right now looks like it'll be August 14th for a preseason football game. But also how are we going to adapt for things that are outside the norm and that we've really never had to consider before. So new manifest, new health and safety standards. Carrie and I are in the same boat with having to get stuff approved by the public health department in Los Angeles and with the state of California. So all sorts of different things that, it was enough to try and open this thing, but now adding on some additional hurdles for us.
And one of the things you mentioned that in your call yesterday that I hadn't even thought of was the hiring of brand new staff for people that have never been in a building like this. So when Jonathan, Carrie, Cait reopen up, it's going to be a re-education of training for their staff. Same thing that we're kind of looking at when we go back to our venues is that it's going to be a whole different thing, and we're going to have to make those our employees feel safe coming back to work and provide them a safe working environment. You're opening a building and with brand new people that don't know your protocols. How are you handling that, looking for staff and giving them that security of hiring?
Yeah, and it's on all sorts of different levels. I think when I started a year ago, I was the 18th or 20th person on the staff. We have about 100 full-time people right now. But we were in the process of just getting ready to start hiring event staff. And for an NFL game day between the stadium, the parking, all the different pieces to operate that, you're talking about 6,000-ish event staff working just for one event. So we were having to readjust our plans about how do we hire, how do we educate and train while we're trying to learn our building ourselves, but then having to take some of this training online. One of the nice things about the ticketing industry is that I've talked to other people in the market and said, listen, we're going to be in a situation where we may find out that we have to hire ticket sellers on, 10 days notice, and knowing that I can call people and say, hey, can you help me out, and give me some names of people that would be great to come over. But even at the level of, I hired my director of ticket operations for the stadium during the pandemic. He never had stepped foot inside the stadium before I hired him. So he's in a unique situation of trying to learn in this building that he's going to be really responsible for running day to day remotely, and trying to get him inside as much as we can to walk around. So for all of us, from the event staff that we need to hire and train, even to us on the full-time management side, really just trying to figure out how we actually are going to get people in and learn how this building works. And it's a complicated building. There's 14 clubs and 260 suites, and there's nothing easy about it. So we're all going to kind of figure it out on the fly and cross our fingers for that April 14th date.
Yeah, it's coming up close within 2 months there. So thanks, Andrew, and obviously best of luck from all of us out there. And you've got a lot of people on here rooting for you and here to help you. And I can't tell you what, all three of you so far have set me up perfectly, right down the middle with a fastball to lead into the next person with the subject you're talking about. But Carrie, also located in the California area and right near Andrew. Andrew brought up a great point of relying on the people around him to kind of help with some of the stuff that he's looking to open, you know. I did the same thing when we came through California last year with the tour we did. Carrie provided us some great ticket sellers who worked great for us on the Apollo 11 tour. But coming from one of the busiest venues around, you know, you're dealing with a lot of downtime now. How are you using that downtime, and how are you keeping that staff that Andrew was talking about, that we're talking about? How are you keeping them engaged? How are you, you know, working on the things that maybe during the regular year we're all too busy to actually work on sometimes? So.
Yeah, I think, well, a lot of the people on this call were on weekly or bi-weekly calls, so we've all kind of been talking in circles, I think, for the last 3 months is what we all feel like, of like, what do we do with this? And, well, wait a minute, what about bathrooms, and what about this? And you start to just go down this wormhole of not knowing when that's going to end. So I think most of our time in the last few months have been developing manifests and talking to promoters on what they want to see, whether it's a 3 foot, a 4 foot, 6 foot, whatever that looks like, just to have the options available to us. Keeping the staff engaged was difficult. When we first started this, we had 12 people. I had 12 people between the 2 box offices that were full-time, and trying to keep them engaged from home was a lot of daily emails and trying to keep people motivated. And then after about 2 months of that, it was kind of like we were all losing that motivation of talking in circles and not knowing all the what ifs. I think the challenges that most of us are facing, and even though we're all a close group, is that each of our state standards are going to be different. So Andrew and I may be able to open at a 50% when Vegas can open at 100% at the same time. So trying to figure out that touring world and even what that looks like for a show here versus a show in Nevada or in, you know, in Ohio is all completely different. So it's, you know, it's a lot of circle talk. And I don't know that we've all figured out the answers to those questions yet, but knowing the options, we have to also know how to like implement them. So, you know, just because I know I have a manifest with all these options, I need to know how our system can sell that and how it would work and what limitations, what legal world are we going into, and those kind of things, what the venue is going to do to reopen, whether it's touchless, cashless, those kind of circles of conversations, but preparing as many plans so you can be ready for whatever the state, county, or nation kind of presents you as your options.
And I know we see a lot of familiar faces on this call, but there are a lot of students on here as well too, and it's going to be recorded and sent out to everyone. So for the non-box office people, when we talk about manifest, we talk about the seats in the building that you're able to physically buy for. We make a inventory of each individual seat. Carrie, I think during those calls you talked about, you were one of the first ones that bring up that the Lakers asked you to come up with one of these socially distant maps. And yeah, we all have had to do some, and we think the work is redundant because, you know, we're going to take a 20,000 seat stadium and get it down to 2,000 people or an arena. How feasible is that? And what's been your experience with dealing with some of those and the frustrations maybe of it too?
Like, I think it's hard too, because the Lakers are the ones that reached out first, but I clearly don't handle their seats and tickets. So we can provide ideas on the venue side of what we see for a generic setting, but how you're going to manage those season ticket holders is a whole nother world. So, and I don't know those clients like they know their clients. So I provided the numbers and the options and what those percentage, maybe it's 25% of your capacity or it's a third of your capacity based on the different measurements. But I think a lot of it is developing them more for the proposed possible events, whether it's WWE or whether it's a end stage concert or whatever it is, and just knowing what those look like. And again, the standards are changing. So like what we all thought a few months ago, if a show got rescheduled with a new date, clearly you're going to be offered a refund opportunity. And we've all seen some of those policies change between promoters. So what our standards were before may not be our new standards. So it's a constantly changing, revolving world that we're adapting to each time, you know.
And that's a great point, because I mean, you deal with so many various different promoters, let alone teams, and each team may specifically want to have a different type of policy as far.
Oh, yeah.
But same thing for those on here as well too that haven't been paying attention, or that have, I'm sorry, that have not been in the mix of all of it. We've all had to deal with various different policies depending on who the promoter is, who the ticketing company is. You know, a lot of the panelists use Ticketmaster, but Carrie is on what's called Access ticketing as well too. It's sometimes not her call as to what the refund policy is, and from what we're seeing is it's, you know, a 30-day from the point of the announced, you know, and you have to make that call. And you're right, some of these shows are being announced a year from now, and who knows what we're going to do. And will this be the end of that year and a half on sale we've seen from the past of like the One Directions and the boy bands that go up way ahead, or even Taylor, who has sold tickets so far ahead because you know you're going to go to that? Or are we going to see tighter on sales and everything right now too, to keep the money closer to the point of origin almost? So great point. And let's build off of that, and kind of I'm just going to open this up to the floor of the panel. What's been some of maybe the frustrations or the challenges you've seen with dealing with the rescheduling and cancellation of shows on a customer service aspect? I know for some of the clients that I have, I get the various different customer service things, and some have been quite unique, and some have been very sympathetic as far as, you know, downright heart-wrenching as, sorry, my father just died of corona, I need a refund for this show. For once in our kind of lives, we're having to pull the human aspect of going to a concert rather than just the blanket of no refund, no exchanges, which we've really always lived under. Any experiences any of you have had related to that you want to jump in on?
I'll start. So for your students and people who really aren't in the industry that are on here, when the whole COVID-19 situation came down, there was a pretty strict no refund policy at all. Nobody wanted their no promoters really wanted their tickets refunded or anything. Eventually they came out and said, okay, you can refund your tickets once you have a rescheduled date. Well, in Ohio, we actually have a consumer protection law that says after 8 weeks, if a show has not been rescheduled, we have to offer refunds by law. We've had a couple shows that refunded at the beginning of this whole thing in March, that we still don't have a rescheduled date. So working with the promoters, letting them know that Ohio is probably unique in this situation. So they have allowed us to do refunds, but we've also had to create a spreadsheet between booking and ticketing that says, okay, this is the date that the show was rescheduled publicly. 8 weeks from that date is this date. So if there's no rescheduled date, we know when we have to start going back to the promoters to say, hey, we need to offer refunds somehow. And a lot of it's working with our ticketing provider, Ticketmaster, working with the promoters, figuring out how we're going to refund those before the mass refund time starts. And I feel for Ticketmaster and I feel for the promoters, because they're also dealing with each state individually, what their laws are, what they can do, what they can't do, and it's got to be tough for them as well to keep up with everybody's individual situations.
Yeah, and I think from my standpoint, the most valuable thing for me, we're again in a different situation. We don't have a box office open yet. Has been the communication internally and making sure that everybody on our staff, whether they're in operations, whether they're in ticketing, whether they're in finance, understands what the policy is for each of the shows. So we've had 5 shows postponed. I think we have 4 different policies on those 5 shows. So making sure that if somebody gets a question, they know the right answer for Taylor Swift versus Kenny Chesney versus Guns N' Roses, and are able to address that properly, so that we're establishing ourselves as just communicating properly with the right information, and really emphasizing to folks that, listen, we're all learning on the fly here. So if there's something you're not sure about, let's all get together and talk about it and ask the questions. That this is a new experience for everybody in this space.
I'd also say from, you know, I think it's the first time I've ever seen refund requests come through because people don't have any money, so they like their money is in that ticket, and that an event before this happened, if an event was postponed, it would be a cut and dry, like, yeah, you can have a refund, it's easy. But to like tell people you can't because it's, you have to wait for 30 days or you have to wait for 60 days till there's a new date, because people are without money and they don't have, there are, lots of unemployment out there. So it's a very different world for us to handle, unfortunately.
Well, the go-to always used to be, resell your tickets on StubHub, or
Yeah.
that doesn't work anymore. Nobody's going on StubHub and buying that ticket off of that person to get their money back. So it crosses another wrinkle in it.
Well, that's a good, sorry, Carrie, that's a good, interesting conundrum as well, because you've got the third-party sites that are not offering refunds at all. And then we have the customers coming to us saying, well, I can't get my refund. They're telling me no refunds. You need to give me a refund. I can't give them a refund because they didn't buy their tickets from me. So that's difficult dealing with the guests who purchase their tickets through the third party.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing with Cait. I mean, that's a constant. 4 months ago, that was a problem at our box office with multiple teams and multiple third-party programs affiliated with each of them, that people will come ask for refunds from us or complaints when they didn't even buy from us. So I got in a battle with somebody who bought through Ticketmaster through resale for the Lakers that I don't have your money to, Ticketmaster's not giving me a refund. Well, I don't know what to tell you. So that was a problem even 4 months ago. And it's just like compounded over and over again with this new situation. So.
Well, there is some hope and light at the end of the tunnel. For those of you, I think I posted something on Facebook last week we saw, but I did put a show on sale last week. A drive-in concert at a drive-in theater out here for the Clarks, local Pittsburgh band, is very popular. It took off pretty well. We can fit about 200 cars in. The second night's almost sold out. But you would be surprised that even after the purchase process, I still got refund requests from people who changed their mind and didn't want to go and everything too after the fact. So it's not just with the old and postponed ones. And my favorite one, I will not mention names, but a gentleman wrote, put in quotations COVID as if it wasn't a thing happening, didn't even buy a ticket, but said, thanks for putting this on. I won't be going. I'll wait for real concerts to come back. So yes, no matter what you do, sometimes you can't make some people happy. Even though we are trying to do progress and I'm doing my part of putting tickets on sale and stimulating the economy, you still just can't make some people happy. So great points, and I've seen the chat blowing up. And I want to give all the students and people on here as well an opportunity to ask some questions, and hopefully we can. Obviously, we started about 5-10 minutes past the 11 o'clock mark. So for those of you that can stay on, we're going to open it up to you guys right now too. And I'm going to put that in Jocelyn's hands, who's been monitoring the chat to point out some of the ones from students and participants that are on here. But go away, take it away, Jocelyn. If there's any good questions directed to the panel, it's in your hands.
Yeah, so once again, if you have a question, make sure to put it in the chat so we can go over it and ask the panelists. There is one from Mark from WWE. He said, is anyone adding any liability language regarding COVID-19 in the ticket purchase process to cover the venue and the promoter?
I would say it's been discussed at Staples Center without a definitive answer. And I think part of that will come from the guidelines we're going to get from the county, state, and maybe even the country as a whole on what's protected and not. We've already heard, I believe it was Utah in another call, that has a law that's going into the bills possibly to protect companies from being sued for those kinds of things. So I think we're all, me personally, I think we're waiting for guidance on that, but I don't think we'd be opposed to putting something. How much it legally protects you is a whole nother situation.
Yeah, we're looking at changing our ticket back language to potentially put something in there that, is not specific to COVID, but around situations like this. But again, to your point, I came from baseball. It always said if you get hit by a foul ball, you can't sue the team. And now they have nets all the way down the line. So we know how strictly that works out sometimes.
I know that I've been on calls where they've talked about revamping the information on the back of the ticket to include that. However, as more and more people are buying mobile, and with this whole COVID situation, the move is to go all mobile. I'm not sure that there is going to be a ticket back to add that information on. So it's like Carrie said, we're still just waiting, trying to figure out what we can do.
Hey, Cait, I know not to jump in and take away from you guys, but along with what we were just talking about, if you look on the show that I was mentioning that we have on sale, it's currently on sale on Eventbrite. You can look up the Clarks in Pittsburgh, PA, or in Moon. We put a bunch of wording on there that I've taken from a lot of these sessions, a lot of just Event Safety Alliance, different things that we've kind of put and piecemealed together as well as working with the Moon Township community. And their restrictions that they had. I can tell you that I think that those refunds I talked about, a lot of them did not read my restrictions before purchasing a ticket, even though we made it as a clickable option, almost as a term and condition of accepting our things. Because Cait, you're right, there's not going to be a back of a ticket maybe for some time. And with everything going digital, you have to have make sure those people are reading that ticket, those parameters. But take a look at those as well too, is if there are any questions that we don't get to, I'm going to look at the chain of this. If you put your email address in any of the things, me or the panel can get back to you with some answers and start some communication beside this as well too. So, right. Jocelyn, go ahead if there's any others.
Yeah, we have one from Rhiannon. She said, will the price of tickets be affected if the capacity of events has to be changed? If so, what does that look like?
Good question.
I will say that AEG brought that up to me pretty early on what we envisioned seeing, and was asking about some pricing from, kind of when we were in some tough times here, like maybe 2000s, the housing crisis and things like that in California, just to see some of the changes in prices. I think that won't be up to us, the venues, to decide. That's going to be the promoters providing that guidance, but I definitely wouldn't be surprised if they may want to increase the prices to make up for the loss of revenue, but I think they will see pushback financially, just like Jonathan said, of people that are clearly need that money for other purposes, that they may not have that ability to do.
And also, we don't know, with the return of concerts, if the deals that are going to be made with the artists are going to change. Because right now, they get a guarantee. They get a guarantee right now on how much they will take away from a show. We don't know how much we can guarantee if you've got 25% capacity. It's going to be, the artists of, like the bigger artists out there are not going to be, they might not be walking away with $1 million because there might not be room to make $1 million. So the ticket prices, we just don't know what those deals and things look like. Service fees is another part of it too, how the venues can, how we, where we make our money from, that could be another, it's another element that might change about how lenient those fees might become or not. I think there's a lot still to be figured out.
Yeah, one of the things we've talked about when we have 71,000 seats is, taking a show that traditionally might have gone to Carrie in the Staples Center, but maybe we can fit 20,000 people in a socially distanced manner. The problem is putting a concert on in my building versus doing it at Staples Center is a totally different dynamic in terms of the cost, starting with the staffing standpoint, the production, everything else. So it's not as easy as saying, well, we'll just take the 20,000, put it in the 70,000 because there's all sorts of other dynamics. But it's something that we may have to look at depending on how long things string out.
And we've been, I know a couple of venues have talked about it on their calls, but we've been reached out to by historically Broadway shows coming and playing in our arenas because we can socially distance those, we can socially distance the attendees and still keep the same capacity that they have in the Broadway theaters. So.
That's a great point from all of you, because obviously sports arts and entertainment management at Flint Park covers a lot of various different areas, but this is showing us one of the first times maybe in our industry that we're all working to think of creative ideas to merge a lot of those into our different places, whether it's put a arena show in Andrews Stadium or put a theater show in Carrie, in your arena. We're all kind of not being forced to work together, but looking and having an open kind of book to be able to rewrite the way we do work together, which is great. We can look at it in a positive way like that. So, great, good points, everyone. Thank you. Jocelyn, I see the chat blowing up, so I don't think there's any shortage of questions.
Let me
Just don't read any from Mark Arata about my haircut. Those are not valid questions. I saw that one. So.
Ken asked, have any plans been discussed regarding fans who don't pass temperature checks? So if you do choose to do temperature checks, how would that work?
So I was just replying to Ken. I was like, we've definitely put some of those things in our policy. So far, I think our reopening plan may just include temperature checks for employees and perhaps not patrons. I think we're considering both and what the legal ramifications for that is. You know, I talked to, my dad works for Disney, so I asked him about how they're handling it because they were going to do temperature checks at the gate. They're in a different situation because you can't come on Monday. We can give you a credit to come, you know, 2 weeks from now. If with the secondary market for us, if we do a temperature check at the door and you can't get into the Laker game and you bought from the guy on the street, what am I doing for you, you know? And what legal ramifications are those? And that might come down to state policies, just like everything else we've talked about. So I think we've explored both, but right now most of our reopening plans are just involving temperature checks for some of the employees and not necessarily fans fully.
Well, one thing you have to think about as well with the temperature checks is you only have an hour to an hour and a half to open doors to get everybody in your building. And how long is it going to take to temperature check every single attendee? So for those of us that work in arenas, we know that 9 times out of 10, we don't get everybody, or people come 15 minutes before the headliner is supposed to start. So if you have to add an extra minute or two onto every single person that's coming in, you have that issue as well.
Yeah, and for us, it's kind of a pipe dream scenario we're working on right now, but because we're developing in tandem with opening the stadium, developing an app from scratch that'll be ready to open up, is there a way to do a pre-check type scenario where, similar to an airplane where I'm pre-cleared, is there a way to get a verification that 24 hours before your temperature is cleared, you don't have any symptoms, okay, your ticket's going to work to get in? There's not a solution for that yet, but it's something we're throwing around and have started to engage with some of the vendors we've talked to see, is there a way to put something like that together where even if that only applied to the season ticket holders for the Rams and the Chargers, that had the ability to, if we could take half the crowd and get them segregated over here, you guys are good to go. And then we only have to worry about people who don't have access to this pre-check type thing. So be interesting to see if anybody develops that. I wish I was smart enough to program it and do it myself. But
you could call it a verified COVID-safe fan. And also, I was just going to say, like, the temperature check doesn't necessarily eliminate people that might be like carriers, because it's one element of it. But having a high temperature could be an element of other things, like having the flu or other, strep or something else that it doesn't necessarily eliminate. It is there to like make our customers feel that we're doing what we should be doing, but doesn't necessarily eliminate the problem. In the same way that face masks doesn't necessarily eliminate everything either. And then when we're also looking at when we're looking at ingress, when people are coming in the building, we have that with basketball. We have like 17,500 people coming in our building. 10,000 people might be coming in a 20-minute, 30-minute window. So like trying to keep them socially distancing as they're coming in the building, and then looking internally at resolution. Those are definitely some of the problems that we're going to have to face, other than just temperature checks, I think. So
yeah, Carrie will be able to relate to this one with me, but we talked about you trying to assign people entrance times, and it's like we're in Los Angeles. That's not I can't tell you what you get in between 12:30 and 12:45 because there's traffic on the 105 and you don't get there until 15 minutes later, or there's no traffic and you get there half an hour earlier than expected. So assigning time sounds great, but I don't know how you actually implement it, especially for somebody in a market like us where everybody's car driven, there's not going to be a reliable, it's going to take me this much time to get there.
Or if you're a Steeler fan, you've been in the parking lot tailgating until 10 minutes before kickoff, which we all know about that as well too. Which also leads to a kind of another conversation I had with some of the guys at the stadium as well too, is, as the box office, we're used to getting sometimes the people who are too inebriated and get turned away at the gate. who find the box office asking for their money back and their ticket back. How are we going to judge and how are we as a customer service aspect going to handle the person that got turned away because of a fever? Are they going to find the box office, ask for a refund? Are they valid for a refund? I'm not a doctor. We're not trained in that. But now as box office people, we're adapting to a whole new set of skills and relating with people. You know, what's the difference from the inebriated fan who may, be damaged to himself by getting in compared to the sick fan who's turned away because they don't want to get people sick around them. I have to judge them differently as well. So yeah, a whole bunch of, it's more like Carrie mentioned earlier, might be redundancy what we're doing, but it's a lot of new questions that we've never been posed with before. But the questions are great. We're going to keep going until about 12:15 if that's all right, and keep going. I think, Jocelyn, we have a lot more going, and there's some great conversation going on in the chat. So let's just keep punching away.
Okay. Well, we have one from Kylie. I've noticed some people that have been answering her. She said, do you think that artists are going to be willing to change the production level in order to take their tours out on the road? More artists kind of going the Ed Sheeran route where you don't need a full band or crew that would be more easily adaptable to smaller venues.
There's an Ed Sheeran Jonathan joke happening somewhere here.
So I was just about ready to reply back to Kylie to say, the productions probably, you may need that, shows may need to change their production based on their guarantee. Like John said earlier, if their guarantee was originally $750,000 and the vast majority of that went to production and their guarantee drops to $250,000, they're not going to be able to keep the same production that we've seen with some of these pop shows that come around. So I definitely think, in addition to what other people have said, the social distancing and all that, you also have to look at how much it's going to cost for a performer to go out on the road. And if we do go into these social distancing with smaller capacities, they're just not going to be able to afford to take those huge productions out on the road.
And also, just off of that, just thinking about the safety protocols and everything that the back of house staff, like the riggers, the number of people that it takes to put on a big production, it's hundreds of people backstage, and they're going to have to, I mean, I'm not in that specific part of the industry, but I imagine they'll overhaul it and they'll have to go through a whole new bunch of safety measures themselves. So reducing the number of people you have to, to keep the production and the back of house simpler is probably going to be a great way for them to try and get around some of those areas of the business, I think.
One thing I've seen in conversation too is the topic of residencies, much like some artists have done in Las Vegas. And instead of the 30 city model tour posting up for 10 shows in one city, and as a fan of music, imagine seeing Pearl Jam play your 2,000 seat theater 10 nights in a row if you can get tickets to it. And John, you mentioned exactly the same thing that's come up on some of the other stuff. How much are these tours and the artists going to want to get on the bus, go from city to city? Are the hotels they're staying at safe? When they get there, has the catering been taken care of? Is catering now box lunches? Simple things like that. And that most artists might not be used to the same thing of come in the morning, go to catering, do the pre-show check. Things are going to change, and maybe on a smaller scale, that gives the artist more security in wanting to come to our venues as well too. So, right. Jocelyn, what do you got? Great question from Kylie. Thanks.
We have another one from Adam. He asked, what are some of the biggest physical adjustments and challenges of the physical box office space? For example, additional PPE required, physical partitions, less staff, or more box office space required due to the social distancing?
Yeah, that's been a big topic, I think, amongst us, the box office, and all of our venues are so different, so we're in LA, I'm behind bulletproof glass, we're kind of lucky in the fact that we have a distance between us and the patron, and we have a very small barrier between our sellers. So I think our new world may involve every other window and things like that, but we have 17 windows at Staples Center, and Microsoft across the street has 5, and they could use 10 more on most events. So how are you spacing out a 5-person venue? But I think a lot of us have also talked about the money handling portion of that too, for the patron side, and possibly going cashless at both the box office or inside the venue. Or I know Andrew and I have talked about maybe if you're not going full cashless, maybe you only have one window for cash just to try to minimize those exchanges. So it's all been, I know a lot of other venues that are open air have discussed partitions and that we see at the grocery stores and things like that. So.
And I think part of it is using technology to solve some of the problems that, again, we're similar. We have the glass partitions, which I hated when I saw the design of the box office, and I'm like, thank you for doing that. But we're going to go as touchless as possible. So EMV credit card terminals that are outside the window that the patron can use themselves, so they're not handing a card back and forth to us. Delivering the ticket via text message or app, even if you're physically at the window, so we're not handing a physical ticket back and forth. So trying to figure out as many ways we can use things like that to help us eliminate contact points. We're still going to be masked up inside the office because there's no way we're going to stay 6 feet apart from a staffing perspective, but eliminating, trying to kind of keep that barrier between the box office and the exterior.
We're in a similar position in Milwaukee because we opened 2 years back, and we're an open plan box office. We have no partition between the guests and our ticket sellers, and they're not partitioned in the back of house either. So so that's something we may need to change. The tap and pay is another thing as well. Like if right now you have an EMV device where you have to put in your PIN number. Does the PIN pad have to be cleaned every time someone uses it? I think we've discovered that we will likely be getting some kind of tap and pay, so it's much less contact. But how much do we clean in between all of these different interactions with guests? There's going to be a lot of rules to come up with. And then from access control, a lot of venues out there are using handhelds. We're very fortunate, and we opened our building with ticket pedestals that our guests actually use themselves and are safe ticks ready. So we're already kind of there in some ways, but this disease and everything that's going on right now is forcing a lot of venues that are not there yet to kind of push their technology and advance themselves forward quicker than they were probably looking to be, in a different timeline to what they were expecting to be doing in the past. So,
yeah, I think it's really important to look at how all of you guys kind of mentioned on it. Other industries are kind of going about reopening too, and it's giving us kind of an idea to adopt from those. Carrie mentioned grocery stores and different things too, and in a sense we're a retail operation, so we may need to start to employ some of those things that they are as well. The other thing is looking at as kind of how, if you're watching it on a global perspective, how the disease is kind of clearing up and getting the okay across the world and sweeping, from New Zealand and Taiwan and South Korea, who are having sports with empty stadiums and slowly starting to integrate people back into it. As we see that sweep across Asia and Europe, I think that gives hope for us as well too, as that wave kind of comes our way of giving us best practices that we can use and adapt to from different things that we see from other countries as well too. So, Jocelyn, maybe one more. I think you got a good one.
Yeah, let me find one here.
Yeah, everybody, thank you so much. This has been great.
One from John Davis with WWE. He said, can you talk about how you are handling events that have been postponed with a total number of sold tickets that now exceeds that new social distancing capacity? How are you deciding who gets in and who doesn't?
Yeah, that's tough. I will say we have so far.
Finished with a good tough question there.
Yeah, all of our, I would say for most of us, I won't say all of our manifests we are creating are probably for new events. And it's not necessarily taking an existing event and making that happen. I think there's been internal discussions. If it's a standalone show and not a tour, maybe you're taking a show to 2 dates and giving them multiple options at a social distancing to adjust for the capacity. But I think all of us are in that same circle boat of whether you're a team side with season ticket holders contemplating that question or whether it's a sold out show. I think for most of us who have shows that are already on sale, when it's being rescheduled, we're imagining that that's happening in a time when that social distancing is not coming into play.
Yeah, it's top of mind for me right now in terms of working with the Rams and the Chargers, and ultimately, they have to make the decision on how they want to handle their season ticket holders. but us working hand in hand to give them the best information set up and then collaborating with them on that process. But, they're going to have an interesting dilemma when, our first regular season game is a Sunday night, Rams Cowboys, this premier event. And how do you handle that when you can't put everybody into the stadium? Do you give everybody half as many tickets? Do you give a priority based on, are you a suite holder down to a regular ticket holder? That's a lot of the discussions we're having right now, is how do we make those decisions? And no easy, good answer on that, unfortunately.
It's so complicated when you look at how events are sold and set up. You have some events with 16, 17 price levels, with aisle seating taken into consideration, VIP packages. Then there's, the artist consignment and the various holds on the tour. I think once you take into account all of what you have for the holds of the promoter's needs, if you keep that, you might not have anything left for the public. So maybe we just have to wait till there's a vaccine. I'm not sure what the answer is yet.
Yeah, I think it comes into a tough decision too for all of us that have, looking at the Steelers, who are pretty much sold out to season ticket holders here in Pittsburgh. How do you decide which ones get to come to which games and tell them you can come to this one but not that one? And unfortunately, John, I think that's the toughest question we've had to pose is how we decide who does come and who doesn't if we haven't implemented those ahead. So that's possibly the next challenge for the next panel, I think. I'm going to kind of
say.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to get some tech people and some health officials on the next one. So this has been amazing. The amount of activity in the chat has been great. Jocelyn, thank you for managing those. I was just talking to Bob, and we're going to wrap up the general session of the panel right now. But for those of you interested in staying on and just chatting, we may unmute some of you guys just to chat a little bit afterwards. But as we start to wrap this up, I just want to thank you guys. This was great and spirited conversation, as well as I know for a lot of you that are in the box office industry, it might be redundant information you've heard, but there's always a new spin on it. And the best thing that I'd like to close with that I've kind of been telling my staff, my employees, my students, and just the people in the industry is even though we can't do our jobs operationally right now, we can make ourselves better educationally. And that's by learning and doing these things. And yeah, sometimes during the end of the week, we may be over-zoomed with information, but it's always helpful when you might hear something different that helps you out when we start to open these things back up and the hope of what it is. And that's really what we wanted to, we didn't want to look at the gloom and doom of the industry at this at all. We wanted to look at the positives and what we could. And I thank all four of you guys and Jocelyn for managing this. Thank you for your positive outlook on things, the different perspective you're able to provide geographically, regionally, different sports. It was amazing. Thank you, everybody. So unmute clap. So, but no.